Formal incident briefings. Verified video proof. Direct accountability. Welcome to Bodycam Incident Reports.
Hands where I can see him! You're trespassing!
I'm the dean of this law school. You're making a serious mistake.
Don't lie to me! People like you don't belong in here this late.
Say that again, and remember this moment, because it will end your career.
The clock on the mahogany wall read 11:15 p.m. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the dean of the School of Law at prestigious Preston University, had simply been packing her briefcase. The only weapon in her hand was a silver fountain pen, a gift from her late father. She wasn't expecting anyone. The campus was quiet, the students deep in the throes of midterm cramming sessions. Eleanor had stayed late to finalize the budget proposal for the new legal aid clinic. Setting down her pen, she had turned toward the door, blinded by the sudden beam of a tactical flashlight. 2 campus police officers stood in the doorway of her executive suite. The lead officer, a burly man with a shaved head and a jaw set in granite, had his hand resting ominously on his holstered service weapon. His name tag read, Officer Mark Reynolds. Behind him, looking visibly shaken and pale, was a much younger female officer, barely out of the academy, clutching a radio. Eleanor raised her hands slowly, palms open. The terrifying absurdity of the moment washed over her, but her legal training kicked in instantly. She remained calm, her voice steady, possessing the authority of a woman who had argued before the Supreme Court. She stated clearly that she was the dean of this law school and she was in her own office. Officer Reynolds didn't blink. He barked that they had a report of a break-in, a suspect matching her description, stealing computer equipment. Eleanor found this ridiculous. She was wearing a tailored Chanel suit, standing behind a desk with a nameplate that read, Dr. Eleanor Vance Dean. She told the officers there was a mistake. She offered to show her university identification, which was hanging on a lanyard around her neck. Reynolds's reaction was immediate and hostile. He accused her of reaching for a weapon when she moved her hand toward the lanyard. He stepped into the room, crossing the threshold of an office that represented 30 years of academic excellence and barrier-breaking hard work. He told her she was acting erratic. He said unauthorized personnel were not allowed in the administration building past 10:00 p.m. Eleanor, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her face a mask of judicial composure, explained that as the dean she was authorized personnel. She pointed to the framed degrees on the wall, her photo on the university website displayed on the monitor behind her. She asked Reynolds to look around, but Reynolds wasn't looking for the truth. He was looking for a suspect that fit a narrative he had already constructed in his mind. He saw a black woman in a high-end office late at night, and in his worldview that didn't add up to dean. It added up to intruder. Before we dive deeper into the nightmare that unfolded next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe that no one should be judged by the color of their skin, especially by those sworn to protect us, please hit that subscribe button. This story exposes a rot so deep within a university system that it nearly brought the entire institution to its knees. What started as a profile stop would end up destroying a corrupt network and rewriting the rules of campus policing forever. Dr. Eleanor Vance was a titan in the legal community. At 56, she was the first African-American woman to hold the deanship at Preston Law. She was a constitutional law scholar, a former federal prosecutor, and a mentor to hundreds of successful attorneys. Her office wasn't just a room. It was a sanctuary of justice. The idea that she would be burglarizing her own workplace was insane. Standing behind her desk, Eleanor made a choice. She asked the officers to pause. She said she was going to slowly reach for her phone to call the chief of campus police, a man she had lunch with weekly. She wanted to de-escalate this by bringing in a supervisor. Officer Reynolds' reaction was explosive. He lunged forward, shouting that she was under arrest for failure to comply. He didn't wait for her to explain. He didn't check the ID hanging inches from his face. He grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back with excessive force. Eleanor gasped in pain, dropping her glasses. "You are hurting me," she said, her voice projecting the command she used in lecture halls. "I am Dean Eleanor Vance. You are making a catastrophic error." "Save it for the booking officer," Reynolds sneered, snapping the handcuffs onto her wrists. The cold metal bit into her skin. You people always have a story. You people. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Officer Jenkins, the rookie, stepped forward tentatively. She whispered to Reynolds, asking if they should maybe check her ID first. The nameplate on the desk was right there. Reynolds snapped at her to shut up and secure the perimeter. He was the field training officer. She was the trainee. He was in charge. What these officers didn't know, what Reynolds in his arrogance failed to notice, was that Eleanor was currently recording a voice memo for her secretary on her smartphone when they burst in. The phone was still recording on the desk. Every word, every slur, every grunt of exertion as he manhandled a 56-year-old academic was being captured in high-fidelity audio. Reynolds yanked Eleanor out of her office. He didn't let her grab her coat or her purse. He paraded her through the atrium of the law library. Even at this hour, the library was populated with law students burning the midnight oil. As Reynolds marched Eleanor past the glass walls of the study rooms, heads turned. Confusion rippled through the library, then recognition. "Dean Vance," a voice called out. Marcus Thorne, a third-year law student and president of the Black Law Students Association, stood up from his table. He saw his mentor, the woman who had written his recommendation letter for a federal clerkship, being frog-marched in handcuffs. "Hey, what are you doing?" Marcus shouted, pulling out his phone. "That is the dean of the law school." Reynolds glared at the student. "Back off. This is an active crime scene. Unless you want to join her, sit down." But these were law students. They knew their rights and they knew injustice when they saw it. Within seconds, a dozen phones were raised. A phalanx of future attorneys formed a perimeter recording every second. They shouted questions. They demanded badge numbers. "She is the dean!" Marcus yelled, zooming in on Reynolds' face. "Check her ID!" Reynolds ignored them, shoving Eleanor through the automatic doors and into the cool night air. He pushed her into the back of the patrol car, not bothering to protect her head as she ducked inside. Sitting in the hard plastic seat, hands cuffed behind her back, Eleanor Vance closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She wasn't crying, she was calculating. She was mentally drafting the lawsuit, the internal affairs complaint, and the federal civil rights filing. "Officer," she said calmly to the partition, "I want you to remember this moment, because it is the last time you will ever wear that uniform." Reynolds laughed from the driver's seat. "I've been on this force for 20 years, lady. I've taken down tougher perps than you." The drive to the campus station was short, but it felt like an eternity. Officer Jenkins sat in the passenger seat silent, scrolling through her phone. She was seeing the live streams popping up on social media. The hashtag #FreeDeanVance was already trending locally. She looked at Reynolds, then back at her phone, terror dawning in her eyes. She knew they had stepped on a landmine. At the station, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The desk sergeant, a man named Tom Miller, who had worked security for Eleanor's events for a decade, looked up as they dragged her in. His coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. "Mark, what the hell have you done?" Miller whispered, staring at Eleanor in handcuffs. "Caught a burglar in the admin building," Reynolds said, puffing his chest. "Claimed she was the dean or some nonsense. Resisted arrest." Miller ran around the desk. "She is the dean, you idiot. That's Eleanor Vance. She signs your paycheck authorizations." Reynolds faltered. For the first time, a crack appeared in his armor. He looked at Eleanor. Really looked at her, standing tall despite the humiliation, her eyes burning with a cold, intellectual fury. Miller immediately unlocked the cuffs. "Dean Vance, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'll call the chief. I'll call the president." "Do not apologize for him, Sergeant Miller," Eleanor said, rubbing her bruised wrists. "I want my phone. I want my lawyer, and I want the university president here, now." Within 20 minutes, the campus police station was a war zone of high-level administration. The university president, Dr. Eris Thorne, arrived in pajamas with a trench coat thrown over them. The chief of police, David Harrison, looked like he was about to have a stroke. They found Dean Vance sitting in an interrogation room, not as a prisoner, but holding court. She had refused water. She had refused to wash up. She wanted them to see the bruises. She wanted them to see the torn sleeve of her Chanel suit. "Eleanor," Chief Harrison stammered. There are no words. Officer Reynolds has been suspended effective immediately. We will launch a full investigation." "An investigation isn't enough, David," Eleanor said, her voice icy. "That man didn't just make a mistake. He looked at a dean in her own office and saw a criminal because of the color of my skin. And when I tried to correct him, he assaulted me. He used the phrase, 'you people.' This wasn't negligence. It was malice." Eleanor's attorney, a ruthless litigator named Sarah Gold, who had been Eleanor's roommate at Yale, arrived like a hurricane. She demanded the body camera footage, the dispatch logs, and Reynolds' personnel file. When the chief hesitated on the personnel file, citing privacy laws, Sarah Gold smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We can do this the easy way, or I can have a federal judge wake up and sign a subpoena that will turn this department inside out by breakfast. Your choice." They got the files, and what they found was not just a bad apple, it was a rotten orchard. Reynolds wasn't just a rogue officer. He was the ringleader of a task force within the campus police that focused on maintaining order. A review of his arrest record over the last 5 years showed a statistical anomaly that was impossible to ignore. 90% of his stops involved students or faculty of color. He had a reputation for patrolling the scholarship dorms, looking for minor infractions, noise curfew violations, suspicious smells, to harass minority students. But it went deeper. The text messages on his work phone, which were FOIA requestable as public records, revealed a group chat named the Gatekeepers. In this chat, Reynolds and 3 other officers, including a sergeant, shared photos of minority students. They made bets on who they could expel. They referred to the law school as the Zoo because of its diversity initiatives Eleanor had championed. They had been watching Eleanor for months. There were messages from weeks prior. Saw the queen bee walking to her car. Thinks she owns the place. One day I'm gonna knock her down a peg. The realization hit the room like a physical blow. This wasn't an accidental arrest. It was a premeditated attack waiting for an excuse. Reynolds had seen the light in her office and decided tonight was the night he would put her in her place. The FBI was called the next morning, because Preston University received federal funding, and because this involved a deprivation of civil rights under color of law, the Department of Justice took jurisdiction. News vans lined the perimeter of the campus. Students staged a sit-in at the administration building demanding the abolition of the campus police. The story went national. Dean arrested in own office, the reality of being black in academia. Eleanor Vance could have taken a leave of absence. The university president begged her to take time off to recover. She refused. The next morning, less than 12 hours after being released, Dean Eleanor Vance walked into her 9:00 a.m. constitutional law lecture. She wore a bandage on her wrist, visible to everyone. The lecture hall was packed standing room only. Students from other departments, faculty members, and reporters crowded the back. The room went silent as she approached the podium. She placed her notes down, adjusted her glasses, and looked out at the sea of faces. "Today," she began, her voice unwavering, "we were going to discuss the Fourth Amendment and the concept of probable cause. However, given recent events, I believe a practical case study is in order." She proceeded to dissect her own arrest from a legal standpoint. She used her trauma as a teaching tool. She broke down the failure of the institution, the violation of due process, and the systemic nature of bias. It was the most powerful lecture in the university's history. Meanwhile, the federal investigation was moving at lightning speed. The FBI raided Reynolds' locker and home. They found more than just bias. They found corruption. Reynolds had been confiscating cash and electronics from students during these drug busts and never logging them into evidence. He was stealing from the very students he was harassing, knowing they would be too afraid of expulsion to report him. Officer Jenkins, the rookie, cracked immediately under questioning. She was terrified of going to prison. She gave the feds everything. She testified that Reynolds had told her, "We have to keep the riffraff out, even if the university lets them in." She admitted that the break-in report was fabricated. Reynolds had called it in after he saw Eleanor in the window. Reynolds was arrested 3 days later. He was charged with deprivation of rights under color of law, kidnapping, assault, and falsifying police reports. The other 3 officers in the Gatekeepers chat were also indicted on conspiracy charges. The trial of United States versus Mark Reynolds became a spectacle. It wasn't just about one officer, it was about the soul of the university. The prosecution, led by a fierce assistant U.S. attorney named David Chen, built a mountain of evidence. But the emotional core of the case lay in the witnesses. It wasn't just Eleanor. The investigation had uncovered dozens of victims. James Okonjo, a brilliant physics PhD candidate from Nigeria, took the stand. He wept as he described how Reynolds had detained him in his lab for 3 hours, accusing him of making drugs with the lab equipment. James had missed a critical grant deadline because of the detention and lost his funding. He had to drop out of the program. "He told me," James said, wiping his eyes, "that people like me were only good for cleaning the lab, not running it." Then came Maria Rodriguez, a shy undergraduate on a full academic scholarship. Reynolds had stopped her walking from the library, dumped her backpack onto the muddy grass, and ripped her textbooks. He accused her of being a townie, trespassing on campus. She was so traumatized, she stopped going to the library at night, causing her grades to slip. The jury listened stone-faced. The defense attorney, a slick lawyer paid for by the police union, tried to paint Reynolds as a tough cop doing a hard job in a dangerous world. He tried to argue that Eleanor was arrogant, that she had escalated the situation. "She refused to comply," the lawyer argued. "If she had just hit the ground like Officer Reynolds ordered, none of this would have happened." It was a weak argument, and it crumbled completely when Eleanor took the stand. She sat in the witness box, the epitome of dignity. Prosecutor Chen asked her to describe the moment of the arrest. "I have spent 30 years studying the law," Eleanor said, looking directly at Reynolds at the defense table. "I have taught thousands of students that the law is a shield to protect the innocent. But that night, Officer Reynolds used his badge as a sword. He didn't see a dean. He didn't see a citizen with rights. He saw a target." "Did you resist arrest?" Chen asked. "I resisted injustice," Eleanor replied. "I refuse to be dehumanized in the place where I have dedicated my life to service." But the final nail in the coffin came from Reynolds himself. Against his lawyer's advice, he insisted on taking the stand. He was arrogant, angry, and convinced he was the victim of political correctness run amok. Under cross-examination, Prosecutor Chen picked him apart. "Officer Reynolds," Chen asked, "you stated in your report that Dean Vance looked suspicious. What exactly was suspicious about a woman in a business suit sitting at a desk?" "It was late," Reynolds grunted. "Usually only the cleaning crew is there that late." "The cleaning crew?" Chen paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "So in your experience, a black woman in the admin building after 10 p.m. must be a cleaner." "I didn't say that," Reynolds backpedaled. "You just did," Chen snapped. "And when she told you she was the dean, why didn't you check her ID?" "Anyone can print a fake ID," Reynolds sneered. "And the nameplate on the desk, the diplomas on the wall, the picture on the website. I was securing the scene," Reynolds shouted, losing his temper. "I don't have time to look at diplomas when I'm dealing with a potential threat. You people don't understand what it's like out there." "You people," Chen repeated. "There's that phrase again, no further questions." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict was read to a packed courtroom. Guilty on all counts. As the foreman read the word "guilty" over and over again, Reynolds slumped in his chair. The arrogance finally drained out of him, replaced by the crushing reality of federal prison. The judge sentenced Mark Reynolds to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The other officers received sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years. The fallout was massive. The university fired the entire police command staff. They created a new Department of Community Safety overseen by a civilian board that included students and faculty. They instituted mandatory implicit bias training and disbanded the proactive units that had terrorized the campus. Preston University settled the civil suit with Eleanor Vance for an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the millions. Eleanor donated every cent of it to establish the Vance Legal Defense Fund, providing free legal representation to students and faculty who had been victims of police misconduct. She also personally funded a new scholarship for James Okonjo, the physics student who had been forced to drop out. He returned to the university the following semester and eventually completed his PhD. Years later, on the day of her retirement, Dean Eleanor Vance stood on the steps of the law library. The crowd of students and faculty stretched as far as the eye could see. She looked out at the diverse sea of faces, future judges, senators, and civil rights leaders. She leaned into the microphone. "They tried to tell us we didn't belong here," she said, her voice echoing across the campus. "They tried to use fear to put us in our place, but they forgot one thing. Our place is wherever we choose to stand, and when we stand together grounded in truth and justice, no force on earth can move us." The applause was deafening, but the story of Mark Reynolds serves as a grim reminder. He sits in a cell today, a man who had power and abused it, a man who thought his badge made him a god. He learned too late that authority without humanity is not policing, it is tyranny. And tyranny eventually always falls. So the next time you see a video of an arrest or hear a story about non-compliance, ask yourself, who is telling the story? And who is being silenced? Because sometimes the person in handcuffs is the only one in the room who truly upholds the law. If you found this story powerful, please share it. We need to keep shining a light in the dark corners of our institutions. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and never let anyone take away your dignity. The tragedy of Officer Reynolds was not just his racism, but his absolute certainty that he was untouchable. He believed that the badge granted him the right to define reality, to decide who belonged and who was an intruder. This is the most dangerous form of corruption, the arrogance of power. True authority is not about demanding submission. It is about serving the community with humility and discernment. When we allow prejudice to blind us, when we refuse to listen because we think we already know the answer, we don't just hurt others, we destroy the very legitimacy of the systems we are sworn to uphold. A title, a uniform, or a position of power does not make you right. Character does. And as Dean Vance proved, dignity is not something that can be taken away by handcuffs. It is an internal force that shines brightest when tested by darkness.
This incident file is closed. For more objective footage breakdowns, please like and subscribe. Thank you for supporting Bodycam Incident Reports.